Hello, everybody. I am Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, joined by Dionne Miller of ABC 7 Chicago. Dionne, the losing streak's over. It's over.
I hardly know what to do with myself. I did not expect that kind of performance out of them. I love it, though. I love it that Mitch Trubisky spent the whole week hearing about how Deshaun Watson should have been selected ahead of him, and he was fantastic. I mean, he looked really strong. Now, I don't know if that changes much about what his future will look like with the team, but gosh, they all needed to feel that kind of confidence coming out of him and to see him take that kind of a step. There's still, obviously, there's so many caveats here. It was a bad team, whatever, but enough is enough, man. They lost 6 games. It was time for something like that to happen. I can't even imagine the weight that's been lifted off of everybody's shoulders at Hallis Hall this week.
Bears 36, Texans 7, 56 days after their most recent win against the Panthers. They finally got another win. David Montgomery described it afterwards as, "We were sick and tired of being sick and tired," which I can totally empathize with and relate to that feeling that he had there. But it has, Dionne, been a weird win because it was so resounding and so convincing and so dominant that it has created sort of this layered discussion in the outside world on trying to translate it and interpret it and figure out what exactly it meant. Number one, it was clearly against the JV Texans squad, right? I mean,
right.
Deshaun Watson is throwing the ball to Chad Hansen and Steven Mitchell. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of those guys before Thanksgiving, right? Not here. Buddy Howell's running the ball in the second half. It wasn't a good football team by any means that they beat. And I think a lot of folks in Chicago almost would have preferred had the Bears won that game, 23-14, and people would have been like, shrug win against a bad opponent. Let's just move on. We know who this team is. But now all of a sudden it's 36-7. You get a complete performance by the offense, the defense, the special teams. Your offense looks like it's got an identity. Mitch Trubisky plays an efficient game, and now it sort of creates this conflict. And I don't know about you, but I sensed on social media and in the outside world on Victory Monday that there was more a level of annoyance from people because they have been forced now to think more deeply about this team, and everybody was pretty convinced that we had them figured out. And I still stand by the fact that I think we do have them figured out, but this complicated things a little bit.
It totally did, because I feel like we woke up the next day thinking, wait a minute. We were all prepared for it's time for a change. They need a fresh voice. Something's not working. And then you woke up and you're like, well, maybe they figured it out. But yet, what does it mean? Does it matter? I think and lost in like all of that was, oh, by the way, the Packers clinched the division on the same day that the Bears won for the first time in forever. And it was just kind of like, okay, well, is it lukewarm? Is it one of those things where it's like, okay, well, yeah, we won, but really we haven't done anything, which I feel like is the truth. This week I feel like is more make or break for them, because I did feel like Detroit was rock bottom. I don't know if you felt that too, but it just felt like, wow, this is the end of this era. And as we talked about last week, there was still a quarter of the season left. Now they win a game, but what does it do? Does it just sell? Are they gonna? This is the road to 8-8, right? That's where we're going.
It feels like that, right?
It feels like that.
I've got a couple of thoughts, and I'm not always right on the bullseye with my analogies, but here was sort of my analogy for Sunday's win. There's like that friend you had in college that you hung out with for a few years and had some like awesome times with. It was always really fun. You got, did some crazy things. By the end of college, you were kind of tired of them. You're like, whatever, we can go our separate ways, and it's no big deal. It's no loss to me. And then you connect with that person again, like 5 years later at a wedding, and you have another great time. And you're like, that guy's awesome. I want to hang out with that guy more. That's kind of what this win Sunday was. You're like, where was that? And what does it mean? And what do you do? The other thing that I'm saying, Dionne, this week is that I'm calling it the seduction of the 7 seed, because if we were looking at this through a 2019 lens back in the traditional NFL world where only 6 teams in each conference got in the playoffs, you'd be staring at the standings and you'd be going, well, they're 2 games back of the 6th seed. There's no way they're catching the Buccaneers. This season's over. It is what it is. It's a disappointing year. More evidence of mediocrity. And yet, because the NFL made this shrewd move in the spring to expand the playoffs to 17, now that line comes down and you're saying, well, wait a second. The Cardinals are the 7th seed. The Bears can be as good as the Cardinals, right? And now you're in that crowd of mediocrity with the Cardinals and the Vikings and the Bears, and you're going, oh, maybe you can get in the playoffs. And so then that creates this opportunity and this temptation to look at this team as if it's got a chance to do something. in 2020,
Right.
and they probably don't, right? And when you scale out,
I think more than probably don't, Dan. I don't think that they do. And I think we, like as you said, we've got them figured out. They beat a JV team. They should have won other games that they lost, but they didn't. They lost and lost and lost, and things looked awful, and they looked lost themselves. They didn't look like they were moving in any sort of positive direction. And so I feel like this is just a moment where we have a week of, yeah, well, maybe, and maybe we'll get another week of that if they are able to beat Minnesota. Then we'll get another week of, well, maybe. But I don't see it like they're not winning the Super Bowl. They're not making this grand, glorious run to the NFC title game. That's not happening. And so part of me feels like, I don't know, do I want them to keep winning or don't I? And I think that's a juxtaposition for Bears fans who are kind of like, all right, we know this isn't going to get us to the promised land. So don't give us this like taste of, oh, we're going to win it and like screw up that too. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's where it's going to be very challenging over the next month for George McCaskey to look at this through the proper lens and filter this properly. Because if you are asking the big picture questions, the ones that really need to be asked, which is, are we equipped to win any sort of significant championship, whether that's the NFC North, whether that's the NFC, whether that's finally adding one of those Lombardi trophies to that very lonely one that they have in the lobby at Hallis Hall? The answer to that is an unequivocal no. You're not moving in that direction in any way, shape, or form. And so now you have to figure out what is the direction of this team and who is equipped to lead it towards championships, right? And so those are the questions he's going to have to answer over these next 3 weeks. What complicated things for me Sunday night and really deep into Monday was how well the offense played for the second consecutive week, right? The first half, they are moving the football at will. You know, they get to 30 points in the first half, Dionne. We couldn't get them to 21 points in a game for the better part of 2 years, right? We kept talking about it. Hey, once again, here's the updated stats. They can't get to 20 points. They get 30 in the first half a week after scoring 23 in the first half. And so now you've got these 7 first half touchdowns in the last 2 games. After the first 11 games, they scored 8 first half touchdowns.
Right.
And so now you go, wait a second, is this an identity? Matt Nagys says they found an identity. Mitch Trubisky thinks they're finding an identity. Allen Robinson thinks there's an identity. Every single Bears assistant coach that we talked to on Monday talked about the gelling together of this group. And you go, oh my God, is this too little too late? Or is this something that suddenly changes the direction of things? And I'm glad there's 3 more games because we can test this out over the next 3 weeks, even against opponents that aren't all that great. But man, it just adds this sudden complication to the discussion. And I had one follower on Twitter call this an inconvenient victory because it was sort of an inconvenient victory for your mental thought processes on how to process this team and translate it.
Because I do feel like it's too little too late. But again, I say that's on the outside of us analyzing everything that has gone wrong and criticizing everything that's gone wrong. I don't know that the McCaskeys are there. I don't know. And so if they do show some promise here at the end, do they get another chance? Does this regime get another chance? Does Mitch get a 1-year contract? I don't know. That to me sounds crazy. I feel like when they didn't pick up the option, that spelled the end for him. But at the same time, like clearly they like him. I do want to give credit where it's due though to Nagy when he knew when it was time to hand off the play calling and let Lazor kind of find his groove. And I feel like that's coming along. It was fun to watch this offense. I'm not going to downplay the fact that same offensive front has been starting the last 3 games. I think that was huge for them to start gelling too. I mean, Alex Bars has played well. I don't know why we did so much shuffling when you're seeing these guys, like you're seeing that consistency pay off. That's what it takes all the time. Now I know they had COVID and injuries and all those things, but gosh, you have to let that unit work together so that they kind of know each other better. And I feel like that's where the success lies. I mean, even David Montgomery said, he's like, that 80-yard run, like me and a truck could have run through there, but they opened that up for him. And he's like, it was them that allowed me to have success today. And that wasn't there through the first 13 games. It wasn't there.
You know, that was the end of the long touchdown drought. The first touchdown by the Bears offense on a play that started on their side of midfield since the middle of 2018. The updated drought statistics that ended 38 games, 430 possessions, 2,464 plays. They finally got a touchdown of greater than 50 yards from their offense. But here's the deal. If you're an offensive coach in that building, what you are starting to lay your case for is we didn't have traditional OTAs. We didn't have mini camp. We didn't have training camp. And so it took us a longer period to settle on lineup combinations, to find our identity. These are the arguments going to be made by the coaches inside Hallis Hall. And then George McCaskey and the folks at the top of that totem pole at Hallis Hall have to figure out how to digest those and filter through them and figure out if there's validity to them. Because my counter argument, Dionne, is the Bears have been looking for an identity. It's not just that it took them until week 14. It's that it took them until week 14 of 2020 when they started this process in the middle of 2019, right? And so why in the world did it take so long to make some schematic shifts to the offense that set your running game up for success, which then set the play action game up for success, which then set your starting quarterback to stay out of harm's way a little bit more regularly? We'll see where it goes. But again, there's just some complicating factors to what we thought a week ago was just a case closed. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what the next step.
And you're right. I mean, I think that they are gonna preach that caveat of like, this is a bizarre year. But I say 3 years. I mean, we've had 3 years now of like them trying to figure it out. And I know 18 was successful, but that was defensive. I more than anything, that was the defense. And now, last year was what it was and kind of spilled into this year where they've been trying to figure out who they are. And I mean, I've never heard a coach say more often, we got to figure out the why and not actually get anywhere with it. And that's where I felt like they are. And so I think that when the McCaskies and they look at this, they have to take that into account. That this is a trend downward, not that was a victory that was so necessary. Their win before that 56 days ago was my birthday. So I remember that vividly and how long it took. I mean, that feels like ages ago for them to be able to celebrate another win. They went winless in November, Dan. Like that shouldn't happen. I know they had some bigger, tougher opponents, but that should not happen. And that's where you wonder where the front office and the family will say, this is where the responsibility lies. And I gotta feel like it starts with pace.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. And look, we've seen enough from this team to understand that they're probably going to lose one of these final 3 games, right?
Yeah,
and then that guarantees that you will not have a winning season, and it probably guarantees that you're outside that playoff picture. And then you just have to process through the mediocrity once again, and you have to make sure that you identify that. And I've said forever that one of the biggest problems within that organization as a whole, in every department of that building, is either the inability to recognize mediocrity or worse, to recognize mediocrity and not know what to do about it. So now this is what they have to figure out as they go forward. But boy, I mean, just the completeness of that win on Sunday was so resounding that it left me stuck on Monday as I rewatched the game and was like, whoa, this is what a really good football team does to an inferior opponent, right? They never let them in the game. They just dominated from start to finish. And for the Bears to get the safety on Deshaun Watson, then take the free kick, march down, get another touchdown to close the first half, knowing you're getting the ball in the third quarter with another touchdown, and really just do all the things that we've asked them to do for 2.5 years. You're like, okay, this is what it looks like when it all clicks together. Now, what are the odds that it all clicks together on a regular basis? I think we still think those are low, but boy, when it is clicking, there were shades of 2018 in that game.
There were, and to see just the absolute I guess just the genuineness of that sideline of just like, oh my gosh, this feels so good to be doing something successful. And all these people wondering, well, if they had stuck with Mitch the whole time, look, you cannot go back and revise the history. This is what they did. They brought Foles in to try him for that position. They're trying to get the quarterback right. And that all goes back to the GM who made the wrong decision. So that's not Mitch's fault. That's not Mitch's fault, but they're trying to get that right. That's what happens when you make the wrong choice. You spend all this time trying to fix it. Again, that's why I feel like change has to happen here, because they are, again, trying to fix a problem that's been going on for decades.
Yeah, what do you do? How do you troubleshoot it? How do you do it efficiently? How do you do it productively? It's an interesting conversation. I will say that you were here in 2013. They got to the end of that season, and that was a mediocre 8-8 year. And yet a few days after the regular season ended, Phil Emery came to the Halas Hall press room and said, hey, we've got Jay Cutler for another 7 years, right? And giving that huge extension with $54 million guaranteed. And essentially what it got you was 3 more years of Cutler, which then led you to the end of Jay Cutler's tenure, in which he finished his career as a Bears starter with an even 500 record, as many wins as losses, right? And you just said, well, how about that, right? And so you just want to make sure that those history lessons remain in the back of your head, and you don't get sort of tantalized by potential when your brain tells you that the potential is really just this sort of circular road that gets you back to the same middle of the road production.
Right. Well, and like I am a Browns fan, but watching the Monday night game and seeing what those 2 quarterbacks were able to do, and I kept thinking, the Bears couldn't do this. They can't do this. So yeah, the Texans were an inferior opponent, right? So the Bears need to get it right offensively to be able to put up 45, to be able to keep up. And they're not going to be able to with the Packers with the way that offense is built right now. That's what I think. And so that's why I feel like the change is coming, whether they beat Minnesota or not. And I kind of think they're gonna, which is only going to infuriate us even more as we sit there on Monday and we're like, wait a minute, gosh, now you've won 2 in a row. Like, stop it. And then you got Jacksonville. Like, just end it. Just stop. Like, stop screwing up this.
because the Jaguars game is a gimme, and you absolutely can't lose that. It absolutely should be. And so this is where it gets a little bit odd and peculiar. The Vikings, of course, a few weeks ago came into Soldier Field when Nick Foles was still the starting quarterback, and they didn't allow the Bears offense to score a single touchdown in that entire game. The only touchdown was Cordell Patterson's kick return. And so certainly you'll get another test, and I'm glad we get these 3 more tests to kind of figure this out and get a little more evidence to take us to the end of the road. But boy, it's just strange to think that this one Sunday after 6 games and 8 weeks of watching this misery unfold suddenly just makes you sit up in your chair and go, hold on a second. Is there something we overlooked? Do we have to look at this more closely? I told my colleague at the Tribune, Brad Biggs, that this was just kind of a check your work win where you're kind of going back and you're just double checking to make sure, do I have this all right? I don't want to turn this paper in, until I'm certain that it's all right. And so here we are checking the work and probably getting a little bit more evidence in the next 3 weeks.
So would you, at this moment, let's just take a poll and a pulse right here. Would you be surprised if Matt Nagy is the head coach again next year?
I guess you have to define surprise.
I mean, what? Well, I don't. Like, would you be shocked? Would that surprise? Surprise is like one thing. I guess I wouldn't be shocked or surprised. I guess I wouldn't be shocked or surprised. I guess I would be shocked and surprised if there wasn't some form of significant change after what we've witnessed this year. You cannot allow yourself to be a prisoner of the moment and let a strong finish to this season sort of wash away that 6-game losing streak and the misery of everything that came with it. And again, Dionne, we talked last week, those 3 consecutive losses at home to the Vikings, at Lambeau Field, collapse against the Lions. That was a miserable 15-day stretch or 20-day stretch, whatever it was, that you have to make sure you go back and rewatch those games and go, oh God, I hate the way that feels. And I can't feel that way again in 2021. I can't position my team to be, say, the 2020 Atlanta Falcons, where you get to the middle of the year and you go, boy, we should have fired these guys last year, right? And then you pull the plug in October and all of a sudden everybody's reeling again. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's worse to be stuck, I feel like, where the Bears are than to even be the Jets or the Jags right now, because, you pick one. Like, don't be in this middle ground where you can't get ahead and you're not so bad that you're doing, you know what I mean? Like, it's that lukewarmness.
I know exactly what you mean, because I think that is what's caused this sort of annoyance / confusion amongst the fan base this week, is that you have folks that want to believe that the Bears are a good team. You have folks that are convinced they're a bad team, and they're neither. They're neither good nor bad. Right. They're just here. They're just stuck in this middle ground of mediocrity, and it's this no man's land that gets you nowhere but creates all this confusion. And now you're trying to figure out whether that wedding invitation is going to get you another great night with that friend from college, or whether it's just going to be like, it sucks, let's move on.
Honestly, if Nagy is there next year, we have to make a T-shirt for him that says, I survived 6 straight losses, because most coaches don't. And that's what you would do with a college buddy that you just have great wedding nights with or whatever.
I told you, my analogies can be a stretch sometimes.
I'm trying to keep up, Dan. I'm trying to keep up. Well, here's hoping that I don't even know that they win again. Okay, well then if they do, then we'll be right back here next week. So
you're hoping they just show us something, one way or the other.
Yeah, one way or another. Either consistent or go back to what we're used to.
Right, exactly. And they'll do it. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. Remember to hit that subscribe button, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, tell them to subscribe, and let's keep this thing rolling. Dionne, thanks.
You bet, Dan.